Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about Kenosha and useful idiot LeBron James, Kamala Rand and this Marxist overthrow, and the CDC 6% and connecting COVID dots. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
Welcome again to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. You may not have known it, but last Friday was the 57th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech given by Martin Luther King in Washington on August 28, 1963. And he closed out that speech with the famous words which so many people now, especially actually conservatives now, quote, which was, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And when this happens, all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty we are free at last. I wanted to start the first 5 quoting that to you today, just to give us a little bit of perspective about what the mission was of the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, and all that America watched and the resulting civil rights legislation that passed. It was a tremendous time, ending segregation, ending the reign of terror of the Ku Klux Klan and the whole, Jim Crow laws, everything that was a horrible injustice in America. And I've often thought it would just be amazing to think about what would be Martin Luther King's reaction if you'd been able to tell him that day, on the day he gave the I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago, that 45 years later, there would be a black man elected president of the United States. I think that he and many who joined that movement at the time would have said, wow, this is great. There's actually going to be a black president in our future. We must have come a long way. Now I want to contrast it with Kenosha and LeBron James. And I will tell you something. This past Thursday on this show, I had actually pre-recorded the show the day before. So I didn't have a lot of information that came out about the details of the incident that occurred in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that resulted in the shooting of Jacob Blake. I didn't have that data, and several of you listeners emailed and said, "Hey, this wasn't right. You didn't notice it. You didn't acknowledge this. You should have said this." So I will say I didn't have all the facts, but now I do, and so I want to talk a little bit about what happened in Kenosha and really what it says about America and LeBron James. And if you don't know the term useful idiot, I don't like to call anyone an idiot, but it's a political expression used by communists when they brought their communist movement to Russia. It was the idea that you could convince people to surrender their freedom, to take the side of the communist Marxist movement that was going to crush liberty, and they would be so deluded by what they were being told that they would go along with you, even though they were essentially surrendering their own liberty. They became useful idiots or pawns in the hands of the communists taking over that country. Now let's talk about what happened in Kenosha. There was a shooting by police officers in Kenosha of a black man named Jacob Blake. And what we knew of it last week, when I talked about last Wednesday, was that he was getting into his vehicle. There had been police called due to some kind of a distress call. Police they still have police there, which is great, who respond to calls from citizens for help. Police responded. First stories out were that Jacob Blake was a good guy hanging around the neighborhood or had come over himself to try to break up a dispute between 2 women. This was not the case. Jacob Blake was the reason the police were called to the scene. He was the reason for the 911 call. And Jacob Blake was reported to the police, or the police came because a woman whom Jacob Blake had previously allegedly sexually assaulted in a most vile manner had sexually assaulted her, had engaged in horrific conduct so bad that she got a temporary restraining order, making him stay away. He still shows up at her house. She's alarmed. She calls the police. So Jacob Blake was not the innocent, sweet daddy of three who showed up to help solve the neighborhood dispute. He was himself the reason the police were there. Second was, so he shows up at this place, the woman who's gotten a temporary restraining order because she's previously been the recipient of his abuse. She's trying to get rid of him, wants him to go away, calls the police. Police come, and in the course of the interaction between and so there's a warrant for his arrest. In addition, there's an outstanding warrant for his arrest for this conduct against this woman. So the police are there. They realize who he is. They're trying to get a hold of the situation. Jacob Blake is resisting arrest. When you have a warrant out for your arrest and the police are there saying, hey, we're here to arrest you, you aren't supposed to resist arrest. You can raise your defenses later. You can talk about whatever it is your defenses are, but you don't get to physically resist arrest. He actually had one of the police officers in that you had your arm wrapped around their head, a headlock. He had the police in that. Police had tased him twice, and it didn't stop him, which is not always, but sometimes a sign that you have drugs in your system that make you able to resist the tasing. I mean, tasing takes down big, strong people. It's intended to stop the most violent among us, and often does. He was not, didn't faze him to be tased. And he, Jacob Blake, is heading toward the van when the police are saying, stop, stop. They're trying to stop him, trying to place him under arrest. And he's headed toward the van door, reaching in. Now, when you're the police in that scene, you do not have to wait to find out whether or not Jacob Blake has a gun in his car, has a knife in his car, is going for a weapon. You don't have to find out. After you've told him numerous times, stop, when you've seen he's got an officer in a headlock, when you tase him twice, when he's wrestled and out-wrestled police officers, you don't have to wait to see what he's going to grab out of his car and wait till he turns around with whatever weapon he had, gun or knife, and try to kill you. You don't have to do that. Jacob Blake, I am very sorry for any person to be shot, and I'm sorry for, certainly in his case, it sounds like he's going to be paralyzed from the waist down, but he brought on his own problems. That's the story of Jacob Blake. That's the real story I didn't have last Thursday because I recorded the show on Wednesday. Now I want to play for you what LeBron James had to say about this incident. I sent this clip to the very wonderful Matt, the producer, what LeBron James had to say about this incident involving Jacob Blake.
If you're sitting here telling me that there was no way to subdue that gentleman or detain him, or to just, before the firing of guns, then you're sitting here and you're lying to not only me, you're lying to every African American, every black person in the community, because we see it over and over and over. There was multiple, if you watch the video, there was multiple moments where if they wanted to, they could have tackled him, they could have grabbed him. You know, they could have done that. And why does it always have to get to a point where we see the guns firing and his family is there, the kids are there, it's in broad daylight. I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as black people in America. Black men, black women, black kids, we are terrified because you don't know. You have no idea. You have no idea how that cop that day left the house.
You know, he ended up saying, as he closed out his statement, he says, we didn't even know if that cop woke up that day thinking maybe I'll go shoot someone or maybe I'll go harm a black person. This is idiotic now that we have the facts. And I was honest enough with you today to say, you, my listeners, to say, hey, you know what? I didn't know the facts last Thursday. Now I do. Here they are. I would love, it would be such a refreshing thing to see in our society for LeBron James to take to the microphones and say, you know what? I didn't know the facts. I'm wrong. The idea that, the police had numerous opportunities to tackle this guy, Jacob Blake. No, actually, they tried to numerous times. Jacob Blake had numerous opportunities to comply, to stop fighting. He chose not to. He chose to intentionally fight off the officers, grab one in a headlock. The concept Jake, what you just heard LeBron James say is disconnected from the facts on the scene, the facts that you could see if you watch all the video now available and have all the information now available. But I want to tell you why I called him a useful idiot. And I don't like that term. I'm feeling like kind of mean even saying that. But that is this. What you're watching in this country, not just the protests about Jacob Blake, but the George Floyd protests, the violence around this country. We are being orchestrated. Our entire country is being orchestrated into and toward a revolution. The forces behind the riots, the destruction, the burning of buildings, the burning of cars, the theft, all of that. This is not organic uprising against injustice. It is orchestrated Marxist overthrow of this country. LeBron James, I don't think he's not one of those Marxists who really love to see the communists take over. He's not that at all. He's just a useful idiot enabling what the communists are doing in using race to try to bring about the Marxist revolution in this country, to manipulate the American people into such outrage over injustices, exaggerated, or in this case, completely, unjustified anger over what the police did. I mean, you can argue, okay, maybe they could have tried to one more time to tackle the guy one more time. But the facts in this case do not justify the conclusion that LeBron James is trying to tell America to come to. LeBron James is falling into the mantra, the manipulation of the communist movement in this country, and he's being played for a fool. I would love if he would have the integrity to come to the microphones and say, I was wrong about Jacob Blake. It'd be great. He could say, you know what? I still think there's too much police brutality in this country. I still think we have a problem with race in this country. I'd still like to see more improvement in police officers and police departments around this country. Fine, say that. But have the integrity to come to the microphone and correct yourself when you have led not just a handful of people, but millions of young Americans who look at LeBron James as King James, the man, the big star in basketball. Have the integrity, correct yourself when what he said last week, truly may have resulted in more division, more outrage, unjustified in this country. Unjustified in this country. And what also happened in response to LeBron James and the whole incident with Jacob Blake was a bunch of not just NBA players refused to play, where they missed a Major League Baseball game, they had NHL, they had all sorts of the professional sports leagues in unity, in support, stand back and say, well, as long as this isn't corrected, we're not going to play either. There wasn't a brave owner of any of those teams, a brave leader in any of those teams to say, hey, wait a minute, guys, you got the facts wrong. This is crazy to be protesting over Jacob Blake. This does not fit with reality, and you're looking like fools. There's not one single leader in professional sports to say that, which unfortunately for professional sports is driving more and more Americans to say, why should we listen to them when they are essentially accusing all of America and certainly all police officers, painting all of America and all police with a broad brush? Why should we listen to them when we know America is a better place than LeBron James is claiming it is? And police, not perfect, but police are much better than what you're trying to hear, what you hear LeBron James trying to convince America that they are. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. So I want to talk about this Kamala Harris and the Marxist overthrow. And I can't tell you, I know that you may be thinking, haven't we talked about this before? Yeah, I mean, kind of, but kind of not. I'm going to mention some things to you that occurred over the weekend that relate to all of this. One is that there is you all know, because we talked about it, there's a communist party in this country. It's been around forever. I mean, since 1920s or something. And the communist movement's been in America for decades. They've been working their way into the American political culture, working their way into academia, spreading the evil of communism, which has, by the way, never worked well anywhere. No one ever tried to fight their way into a communist country because they couldn't stand all the freedom in America, or they couldn't stand the freedom here, and they couldn't wait to go live in Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, or China. These things don't happen. Everyone, the natural human instinct is to fight against the repression of communism, and yet we have a communist movement growing in America. There is a guy who is the leader of the communist movement that is actually called the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States, this Bob Avakian. And he has a statement out this past weekend related to all of the violence we are watching in this country. He knows exactly what I am telling you. He sees this unrest. He sees these riots. He sees these instances. And obviously, some of the instances in which people get upset with the police were justified. I mean, the idea what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis in May, late May, that was, clearly unjustified. And I know all of the theories about whether it was a big setup. We're not going to go there. But what everyone saw on national television with the officer pinning George Floyd's neck under his knee and George Floyd dying later that day, these are things that are righteously upset about. But back to the Communist Party, the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States. Bob Avakian puts out this statement. To all those who have risen up so powerfully and demonstrating to say no more after the murder of George Floyd. And then he goes on to say, we need revolution, nothing less. A strategic plan for how to make this a revolution, a sweeping vision, concrete blueprint for a radically different and better world. He has written the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. That's what he wants America's future to be. And I'm telling you, people, you got to look around and recognize, because in this massive unrest we have in our country, you have the Bob Avakians, the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States. You have the academic, communist, Marxist, socialist thought leaders. All these types have been working toward this moment for decades, but they think we're here. They think we've arrived. They think they are on the cusp of turning America away from being a country rooted in freedom into a country rooted and squelched and crushed by the evils of communism. They think we're here. They think the Democrat ticket is their way to get there. So understand, there are the leaders of the movement, the Avakians, the kind of thought leaders of communism and Marxism, and there are masses and millions of useful idiots who think they are justified, think what they're doing is standing up for justice or standing up for whatever it is they would say, standing against the evil of what happened to George Floyd, and it was evil. But those people are now in the millions in this country. It's not like we have a tiny little, minuscule 0.000.2% people who are communist Marxists. We have a growing movement in this country. And they are motivated because they are ignorant. They don't know any better. They think what they're fighting for is justice, and they're fighting to crush the entire country, the beauty of America, the greatness of America, crush it and turn it into a communist Marxist country. That is the mission. And I will tell you, among many reasons you should know this is when you look at these marches around the country and the riots and the protests and the burning of buildings and burning down cities, you rarely, if ever, see a list of demands. You don't see demands that say, we're rioting because we want to have changes in federal law relating to, sentencing, or we want to end the police department's use ever of certain tactics to arrest people, or we want to. There aren't demands that you could. This is what you would do if it was a real protest in the context of preserving America. You'd make demands, you might have a march, you have negotiations, you try to run people for office who will implement what you believe in. That's what you do when you're trying to hold on to America. These people are trying to end America. The leaders at the top know exactly what they're doing. The useful idiot masses joining in this, many of them paid, and so they'll, rent a protest, or they'll go protest anything, and many of them ignorantly thinking they're standing up for justice, and somehow, if we just burn one more building down, all of a sudden we'll have utopia America. They have no idea what they're doing because they're sadly the product of an education system that didn't teach them anything about what they're actually standing up for. So, in Kenosha, by the way, President Trump is going to head there, and I think the mayor of Kenosha and perhaps the governor of Wisconsin both said, no thanks, we don't want you to come. He's coming anyway, as he should. I will tell you, by the way, when I talk about this being being a movement, a compensated movement, an orchestrated, manipulated, this is not an organic protest. They had arrests in Kenosha over the weekend, 175 people arrested. Probably should have been more, but 175. 102 of them, 102 out of 175, do not live in Kenosha. These are shipped in rioters, shipped in, violators of liberty, violators of our peace. These are shipped in criminals who showed up in Kenosha. But I want to tell you that, in fact, on our website, AmericaCanWeTalk.org, you can read the longer screed that came out of this Revolutionary Communist Party, a long litany of how they're going to make America perfect and fair and blah, blah. I mean, the most ridiculous, standing up for the most evil, repressive ideology in human history and claiming they're here to help you. Don't worry, they're here to help you. So I want to hit a few quick stories. So Rand Paul had a hard time. We had that beautiful, beautiful RNC ceremony, Republican National Committee, the very ending of it, President Trump delivering his address at the White House. And then you had people, Senator Rand Paul of Kansas and his wife walking back to their apartment 2 blocks away, or to their hotel 2 blocks away, assaulted by the mob. And Rand Paul, we had a clip for that. And actually, I don't know if Matt and I got our clips together here today. We do have that clip. Okay, so we have a clip of Rand Paul being surrounded and hassled. He has to be protected by the police from the mob as he is leaving the White House.
I know who that is. Say her name. Say her name. Say her name. Back up. Back up. This is fascism. This is what fascism looks like. You're not gonna say her name, man. Back up. You're not gonna say. You're not gonna say her name. Back up. You can't say Breonna's name, man. Come on now. Rand Paul won't even say her name.
Okay, people, I have to tell you, just to tell you how completely impossibly ignorant these people are. Breonna Taylor was a black woman who was killed by police. She was unarmed. It happened in Kentucky. And, I have not dived into the facts of that, so I'm making no commentary about whatever caused that shooting, whether it was justified or not. But the idiocy of yelling, say her name, Rand Paul introduced a bill in the Senate called the Breonna Taylor bill. He tried to say that at one point to one of the protesters. Actually, I have said her name. I introduced a bill called the Breonna Taylor, but they want none of it. This is, again, my point. These are not people trying to have an intelligent conversation. They don't have a mission. These are people fed and intentionally manipulated by the radical left in this country into perpetual, ignorant outrage. They don't even know what they're talking about. But he and his wife surrounded, they weren't harmed, but they were surrounded and had to be escorted by the police to protect them from this mob to get back to their hotel room. Also happening in Washington last week, you had, of course, because we had the end of the RNC convention happening in the White House grounds, you had these helicopters overhead, DC helicopters, trying to keep track of these lunatic mob that has been attacking people around this country. Again, this is not peaceful protest. This is not the kind of protest protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment allows you can be in a relevant area. You can't be shipped off to out of town to do your protest. You can be in a relevant area. You can be where you're actually seen by the media, but you have to comply with the law. These people are simply trying to disrupt everything happening and deciding until they get their way, which who even knows what they would say their way is, they get to keep disrupting, destroying, yelling, screaming. And at this incident in Washington, the mob was throwing objects at the police. I mean, frozen hard water bottles, few bricks tossed. And this is not a peaceful protest. And then you had the DC police helicopter overhead, and one of them was hit by laser lights sent up by this Marxist mob in Washington, laser lights getting into the eyes of the helicopter pilot who had to make an emergency landing. One of the people on board that helicopter had to be treated at the hospital. I don't know if he's still in the hospital or not. And we had the same tactic used by the rioters in Portland, using laser lights to try to blind police officers. And allegedly there was one police officer permanently blinded in one eye. People, this is not peaceful protest. This is an orchestrated revolution unfolding before our eyes. Next story, Kamala Harris. Oh, by the way, back to Washington. One more thing about Washington. So you had all these people in Washington, mob outside the White House, people actually trying to sit and listen to the president and others deliver their remarks at the White House. We had this very modified Republican convention this year because of COVID, which we'll get to next in the show today. But you had people trying to disrupt it, trying to storm the gates, and police did end up firing rubber bullets and tear gas into the crowd. And again, the radical left complains, that is so cruel. How could you use rubber bullets? It's like they're saying, we get to protest. We can protest all we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to let us protest. And we get closer, and we get to the point where we are a mob, and we're rioting, and we're threatening people, and people are alarmed. Rand Paul and his wife weren't the only ones. Others, too, had similar stories. And they're acting as though they're just shocked and outraged that the police finally say, you just can't do that. You can't do that in America. You're going to have to leave. And so they use rubber bullets and tear gas. So that happened in Washington. And so, I could go on just about what happened that night. But I want to hit two other things, all in this whole segment relating to how we are watching a Marxist revolution before our eyes. Next is Kamala Harris. She is now officially the Democrat candidate for vice president under Joe Biden, which means unless someone replaces Biden, either in reality or actually gets on the ballot somehow or gets in the White House, Kamala Harris will be the leader of the Democrat Party because Joe Biden has no idea what's happening at all in life. So here we have Kamala Harris, what she said recently in a late night interview on Stephen Colbert.
Clear that I know that there are protests still happening in major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I had
that's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not. This is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Okay. It would help if she would say, because we need to fight for changes in police policy. We need to fight for changes in the criminal justice system. We need to fight for what? What you just heard out of her is as close to a threat as a person could get. She's right with them. And I'll tell you, it's been kind of really interesting on this whole thing with Biden and Kamala Harris, because you look back how all these riots started. We had George Floyd in Minneapolis, killed by a police officer on May 25th of this year. So, a while ago. We are now the end of August. So it's May, June, July, August, over 3 months. You had, and you've heard zip, zero, nada, nothing out of any Democrat official. No Democrat at the national level will condemn any of the violence, any of the rioting, even when police officers are killed, even when police cars are burned, even when buildings are destroyed, even when cities are left looking like, Beirut. You hear nothing. Stone cold silence. They are okay with this. Or if you think they're not okay with this, Democrat officials in Washington cannot criticize anything that's attached to the name Black Lives Matter, even though now more Americans are awake to the reality that Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with Black lives. It's just a convenient use. And again, useful idiots being used by the Marxist movement in this country. They pick up a name, Black Lives Matter. They have statements from the founders. We are Marxists. We are trained Marxists. And you had on their website, the BLM website keeps honing down what they're saying, but they acknowledge very, very forthrightly, yeah, we're about, basically destroying the intact family units, destroying patriarchal society. They are Marxists. They are not trying to fix America within the confines of the free America that was created, the beauty of America created at our founding. They're trying to destroy it. But you can't get one Democrat official in Washington to criticize Black Lives Matter. Certainly can't get them to criticize Antifa, because the Democrats running in Washington, they need the Marxist vote. Please understand that. They need the Marxists to win. So Kamala Harris is not willing to say, we have to move forward with certain policy ideas. We have to engage in conversation. She's just saying they're going to keep rioting, and she has no apology in her tone, no apology at all, as this Marxist movement is marching forward in city after city after city. Now, I want to tell you one other thing that happened recently. You had Don Lemon, the CNN. He's a black racist. He is a host of CNN. And Don Lemon actually made this statement on August 25th, 26th, somewhere in there, over the weekend, saying basically, I think maybe the Democrat ticket needs to start to condemn this violence a little bit. Not because it's wrong, not because it's not moral, but, says Don Lemon, because it's starting to show up in the polls. Because pollsters are discovering, shock of shocks, America does not want to have riots continuing in our country. We're just not up for that. We want to have safety. We want to have peace. We want to have law and order. So Don Lemon says that. So finally, Joe Biden came out of his basement briefly to make the comment that he condemns this violence, and he calls on President Trump to condemn it too, which is so beyond idiotic. I mean, Trump has been denouncing the violence and continues to denounce it, and Biden trying to pretend he's somehow capable of taking the high road for the first time, late August, commenting on riots that started at the end of May. Over 3 months ago, we've been in riots consuming American cities. And Biden finally, in the last weekend of August, goes, maybe I'll say something about it. I'm against violence. So ridiculous. Their side is stuck because they have fomented this, they have legitimized it, and now they're in a position where it's very hard for them to say, but we really can't have this go on and on. The other thing I mentioned about Kamala Harris, which just ties into her carrying responsibility for what's occurring, she did a huge fundraising push, a donation push, to help people, to urge people to donate to the hashtag was @MN Freedom Fund, the Minnesota Freedom Fund. It is a fund to pay for bail so that people who are burning buildings, looting, rioting, mobbing cities are not held in jail. These people donate to the fund, and then the bail lets them get out. 3 particular people. There's an article on our website. I'm not going to go into it right now, but you can go read it on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop-down list of links. 3 specific people you can tie to. Their bail was received. They got out of jail because of bail money paid by this, who turned out to be, respectively, murderers. Murderers, a twice convicted rapist, now charged with kidnapping, assault, and sexual assault. In 2 more cases, her fundraising helped get these guys free. Seriously, she has no claim to this law and order position she says she's taking now. The last 2 things I want to hit in this segment on the show today, I want you to understand we're watching a Marxist revolution. I'm trying to run through examples. Another one has to do with what's happening in Portland. And in Portland, you likely know, there was a murder of an unarmed Trump supporter by the Antifa crowd. So first I want to ask Matthew Wonderful to play. This is a clip, the interview from the article we just found right before we came on air. This is the guy speaking who was walking with his friend, both unarmed, in Portland. They went there to stand up for Trump, and Antifa turned on him and murdered his friend he was walking with. Here you go.
It escalated to the point that they executed my partner. They hunted him down. They hunted us down. They recognized our Patriot Prayer hats. For anybody who doesn't know Patriot Prayer, Joey Gibson, the Citizens Advocate, he's a good man. We support him. He's a Christian conservative. So they identified our hats. We've got a couple of them right here. We've got a couple of them right here. Pull it out. Pull it out. And is that what they said? That's what they said. We turned around. It didn't even register that somebody was pointing a gun at us until the shots went off and took off running. The shooter took off running. The shooter took off running, and it takes a second for you to process everything that happened. Did he just shoot at me? Okay, I'm okay. Turn over, and Jay's dead. Because he believes something different. Jay's not a racist, he's not a xenophobe or whatever label, he's not an ist or an ism. He's an independent man. He's a good man. And he didn't do anything to earn a bullet in the chest.
If you could ask anything right now of Donald Trump, what would it be?
Send troops. Send troops.
Okay, people, I have to tell you, I know there are many people on the conservative side who are advising President Trump, don't send in troops, hold back. First of all, maybe this will settle down, which, clue, it'll never settle down until after the election. Never. This is orchestrated, paid, intentional, revolutionary conduct. It won't settle down. But then the second thing is, question people have is, will it somehow backfire on President Trump if he sends in troops, or then the left is able to point to him as to, now he's heading toward taking power in this country, or he's headed toward, becoming a dictator. He's sending in military troops against innocent people. It's a very hard question. I'm going to get to that whole assessment another day. But the point in sharing that with you today is to point out these people would shoot an unarmed guy walking on the street who wasn't taunting, he wasn't even talking to them, because they feel justified killing anyone who dares to disagree with them. And now I want to ask Matt the Wonderful play. There was a clip of the crowd scene, these Antifa people, Antifa BLM people, who shot and killed this guy in Washington, or one of them did, their reaction when they discovered they killed someone.
I just got word. The person who died was a Patriot person. Yeah. He was a fucking Nazi. Our community held its own and took out the trash. I am not going to shed any tears over a Nazi die. And tonight, I just got word. The person who died was a Patriot person. Yeah. He was a fucking Nazi. Our community held its own and took out the trash.
Okay, that's enough for her. That's enough for her. But you have to understand what she's saying. First of all, everyone who's conservative, these crazies call Nazis. They use the word Nazi, which is a whole other thing we're struggling with in this country. The overuse of the word Nazi, which the left uses for anyone who in the slightest supports President Trump. But this particular person is talking about the shooting of a person who wasn't doing anything to them. And she's characterizing shooting a person as taking out the trash. When I tell you, when I say useful idiot, it can seem like I'm saying, well, they're kind of simple-minded, but they are not. They're dangerous, they are funded, they're organized, they're revolutionary, and we are living in extraordinary times in this country, and it's vital that everyone understand, everyone see the picture of what we're facing, because it should help you. It should help a lot of people in this country who are saying, well, I'm Republican, but I don't think I like Trump too much. I'm thinking of voting Democrat this time. You have to understand, you're voting for Marxism. You're voting for the Marxist takeover of this country. It's nothing less. When Biden gets in, he doesn't even know what day it is. He's not going to be president. You have Kamala, who will then be in charge, who is advocating on behalf of the people who are burning our country to the ground. And just stop and think how crazy it is in this era where America elected a black president twice, literally millions and millions and millions of Americans, including millions of white Americans, voted for President Obama. We've had decades of improvement in our society. We have our country has made so much progress from the time Martin Luther King came around and gave his beautiful I Have a Dream speech. We've had laws passed that protect against discrimination. We have awareness in our society of racial sensitivities. We've had programs to help inner cities for decades. We have a president who's bringing opportunity zones to inner cities. We have a president who just featured at the RNC convention many black Americans who have been blessed and helped by his administration, by what he's doing to lift the burden that has been on the black community in America with too many black Americans incarcerated. He's tried to help, tried to change things, tried to have changes made in our criminal justice system, the First Step Act, helping people transition out of prison back into our workforce, into our society. America's a good country full of good people. Not perfect, not every person is perfect, but a good and noble country filled with good people. This country does not deserve, this country is not guilty of being the evil racist place that these protesters, these rioters are claiming that it is. They are not rioting because of true evil in this country. They're rioting because they are they're funded, they're encouraged, they're manipulated into outrage, and they are rioting in a country, a place that makes no sense based on who we are as a country. And in this fall, when you have friends saying, well, I'm not too sure I'm going to vote, be the one to speak up and say, you do understand that this leader, the one I mentioned earlier, Vakian, who's the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, has endorsed Biden. He's swell with Biden. He thinks Biden's a great idea. Kamala Harris, even better. Loves these people. I know that when you're a candidate, you aren't responsible for the viewpoints and opinions of every single person who votes for you or every single person who endorses you. But if the Biden-Harris team was not supportive of Marxism, was not supportive of communism, was not supportive of socialism, they would say in this case, you know what? We got this endorsement, but we, the Biden-Harris team, we're on the American playing field. We believe in the free market system. We believe in the freedoms in our Constitution. We believe in the founding freedoms of America. We reject the arguments of the radical left. They're trying to destroy America. That's what you would say if you were Biden and Harris and you actually believed in America. They can't say it because they need the vote of the radical Marxist left. And if they get into the White House with the vote of the radical Marxist left, what do you think their policies will be? Do you think they'll stand up for free enterprise, entrepreneurship, individual freedoms, freedom of religion, freedom of speech? All of that would be gone if this communist revolution, Communist Party got their way, and Biden and Harris are skating toward the White House, or so they think. I think Trump's going to win, but they are running toward the White House, embracing and accepting the support of people who want to radically overthrow the very existence of a great and good America. That's where we are in 2020. And one more topic for today, and I always have more topics than time. It's kind of the story of my life. More topics than time. This is just the way it goes. But I want to talk in this last segment about the data that came out. There's new information about COVID, and there are a bunch of stories to hit about this that actually are extremely consequential, just extremely consequential in our country. One, on COVID, I want to just tell you that there's a lot of data out now, and I want you to go to our website and read this yourself. But there's a new study out from the Annals of Internal Medicine. The Annals of Internal Medicine did a new study publishing on the question of just how contagious is COVID-19 really? How contagious is it? Once they're done with their study, and once you see what they had to say, you'll plainly understand that we have been hoodwinked, we have been manipulated into treating COVID-19 as this, as this tsunami of contagion that's going to overwhelm everyone unless we all duck and mask and cover and hide and stay at home. Not necessary. Not necessary. We have been played. Read the actual study, and then I'll tell you what it means. The study means we don't need to be wearing masks anymore. We don't need to be socially distancing. We don't need to limit the number of patrons allowed in restaurants, bars, and other places. We need to stop mass testing. We'll be on testing in a second again in a moment. But the entire contagion argument about America was a fraud. It's so important to understand. We got duped. So the contagion is not what we thought it was. I'll tell you just one little, several little tidbits on that subject to understand how extreme how extreme our beliefs have become because we've been manipulated and what the real facts are. Let me just give you one example. There was a recent study about where they had closely monitored individuals who had close contact with someone infected with COVID-19. Of those who had close contact with this asymptomatic person, so a person has COVID-19, they've been tested, but asymptomatic, only 1 out of 305 people who came into contact with this person who had COVID-19, asymptomatic but had it, only 1 in 305 contracted the virus. It's not the contagious fear-mongering thing that we've been taught. It's really, really important to understand this. Second thing is median age of fatality. Median age of fatality, 80. I mean, I don't want anyone to die. I want everyone to be healthy, but it's not. We are not in this country consumed. We are not facing a virus that's going to wipe out the mass population in this country. The median age of fatality is 80. We have been taught to obsessively fear, unjustifiably fear this, and unjustifiably fear the contagious nature of it. So we are now running around like lemmings. We're afraid. Some people, I'm not afraid. Some people are afraid to go out of their house. They're afraid to talk to their friends. They're afraid to give their friends a hug. They're afraid to go to events. You have event management teams afraid to host events in their places. I mean, you have the entire country wrapped up in this fear of contagion, unjustified by the actual data about how contagious. You got to read this study. And then, of course, you have Jerry Nadler and other leftists, when they realize good news is coming out. Oh, no, don't be listening to good news. Don't listen to good news. No, it's really, really bad. But yet you see they're out in public without masks. They are. You can catch pictures of them. Media will find pictures of them sitting around talking to people in public. But they think they can control us with this fear. If America can break the fear of this fear of the contagion, we can break this lunacy that has overtaken our society. We're running around like scared children with masks and socially distancing. So read this study, Annals of Medicine, saying it's not the contagious nightmare that the left tried to tell us it was. Second is the idea of masks. There are so many studies now pointing out that, first of all, when you wear the kind of mask most people wear, which is not, hospital grade, it's just a piece of cotton, air is getting out the sides. It's not, stuck on your face. Air is getting out the sides, and you're not really protecting other people around you from your breathing, your normal breathing, because it's not containing all of the air that you are exhaling. Second is, it's very bad for people, healthy people, to even wear masks. It is actually unhealthy to wear masks. And so there's a long list of research, again, at our website. Go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage under shows. Drop down list of links. This article, The COVID Testing Scam, was just exposed in one graph. This article makes a point. The masks, there's a long list of articles, of research studies showing masks are not only not necessary, they're bad for you. And then second, this whole testing thing is a further scam. The testing thing is a scam because and they have a great analogy here. It's like if you went around and asked 100 people today, how many of you are left-handed? And let's say it was 1 out of 100. And so you say, okay, now we have our data 1 out of 100. And so the next day you ask the next 100. So now you have 2 out of 200. And then the next day, 3 out of 300. Up. Point being, in day 27, you're going to have a big number of people who are left-handed compared with the first day. But it doesn't mean there is a contagion of left-handedness going around. It means you kept studying more people. If the ratio remains 1 in 10, nothing has changed in terms of left-handedness, or 1 out of 100, then no matter how many people you test. Well, the same is true of COVID testing. When the headlines scream new numbers, 374 new numbers, new test cases, or whatever the numbers they come up with, they're intended to be scary headlines, intending to create and perpetuate the culture of fear. So then the culture of submission. So you do whatever the government tells you because you're living in submission, because they put these numbers out there to scare you. If the ratio isn't changing, and it isn't, in fact, if anything, let me finish that point. If the ratio isn't changing, then there's not a reason to be alarmed. They're just testing more people. And this is what they've been doing with this testing. But I want to make there were just so many good points in this article I really, really want to share. Another one being this whole notion originally that asymptomatic people were big spreaders. Completely untrue. And in fact, they have all sorts of examples. And I can't even recount them all to you. I'm telling you, all these examples where they did tests, they follow up. They had one test of 372 people CDC tracked down after having been tested, who had contact with either of these people who tested positive. 372 people were tracked down because they had gotten in contact with someone who confirmed case of COVID, and the answer was 0 people. 0 of those 372 who had close contact had contracted the virus. They also had, this gets pointless. We are fools to continue playing along with the fear of contagion and the idea that masks are somehow helping us. Masks are resulting in America being a nation living in fear and living in submission. Very, very dangerous and ungood for America. Next point, this was a big thing that made the news over the weekend, and I want to talk about it with a little bit of a qualifier. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, changed some data on their website, or made an announcement on their website. What they essentially said is, on their website, for 6% of the deaths. And so they have, to be clear, CDC has a number out there, whatever it is, 178,000 people they claim have died of COVID. And so on their website over the weekend, they said, for 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned. So on the death certificate of these 192, whatever the number was, 178,000 total deaths, only 6%, or under 1,000. Under 1,000 of the COVID deaths, there was a death certificate that listed COVID as the only cause. For deaths with conditions or causes in addition to COVID, on average, there were 2.6 additional conditions or causes per death. So the hashtag went wild on Twitter saying only 6%, only 6%. And I wanted to have one little qualifier about it because I think the left is quickly trying to regroup itself and say, don't listen to that, no reason to stop fearing, everybody still has to stay home, everybody still has to wear a mask, everybody has to stay shut down, we still can't have normal life, you can't have rallies, you can't have restaurants. They don't like the idea of America coming back because they don't want the economy to become strong again, because then that helps President Trump. And they don't want America back to healthy and robust because then they can't control them. But I want to make a really important point. All that thing is saying is that when a doctor puts cause of death on a death certificate, and it was one of the deaths they counted in their data of 178,000 people who died of COVID, only 6% had COVID listed as the only cause of death. That does not mean, to be clear, there's several, so people are trying to say that means that everybody else, the other 94%, had pre-existing conditions. That was the conclusion. It doesn't necessarily flow. 6% had listed COVID only. The other 94% had COVID plus something else. But it is not clear from the data CDC has provided, or even if they have this data, whether people who fell in the other 94%, and were listed a COVID death, had some other condition, but the condition itself may have been caused by COVID. And I think it's important to understand this because then you sound really smart talking to your friends who are quick trying to say, oh, this is another Twitter mob, they're crazy. In fact, Twitter is trying to take down every conversation about this 6% number. But let me just explain what I'm saying. So if you contract COVID, one of the things that happens sometimes when you contract COVID, you then develop pneumonia, you develop other respiratory ailments. So if you were healthy and you contract COVID and then you contract pneumonia and some other ailment, respiratory ailment, your death certificate may say COVID, pneumonia, some other ailment. And so you'd be falling in the 94%, but you actually were a healthy person before you came in touch with COVID. The COVID caused the pneumonia, wherever else it is. I know this sounds like a little bit of parsing or a little unnecessary parsing, but the 6% number does not necessarily mean that the entire 94% of other people who died of COVID all had pre-existing conditions. Some of them may have had conditions listed on the death certificate that were caused by COVID. Having said that, it's also important to understand that the CDC caused much of this problem because early on they were urging doctors to put COVID as a cause of death even when they only suspected its presence. So there may not even be in that 6% that said COVID, those may be not even really COVID deaths. Those may have been deaths caused by other diseases or caused by a combination of diseases. But because the doctor thought the patient had COVID, the term was reasonably suspected COVID, they were allowed to use COVID as a cause of death. And so I'm just saying even the 6% number may be too high. It may not even be that. Maybe doctors use that coding because they were forced to by CDC. And I know that everyone on the conservative side, myself included, I am completely aware that our country is being manipulated using the COVID-19 fear. Just like our country is being manipulated by the communist movement in our country, we're being manipulated by the COVID movement. We're being manipulated because we have people in high positions of power who want our country to remain shut down so the economy doesn't improve, because when the economy comes back, it helps President Trump get reelected. It also is, if you are of the mindset wanting to have America, lose our zest for freedom, lose our love of freedom, as every Marxist wants. Marxists want Americans to lose their love of freedom. This is a great vehicle to do this. A great vehicle when you have people suppressed, fearful, wearing masks, staying at home, afraid of everything. This helps develop the fearful mindset and helps, and what the Marxists want to do is have Americans lose their zest for freedom. But on the CDC thing I talked about in this caption, I think I something called about connecting dots. I'm very serious when I tell you the COVID situation is being used as a political manipulation in this country, both because CDC's, playing with numbers, coming out with this, 6% only had COVID as the cause of death, which means what all of us have known for a long time. If you're otherwise healthy, you have almost no chance, unless you're like over 85, you're not going to die of COVID. And this is what leftists know, that the disease itself is not threatening to healthy people. It's not threatening to the mass majority of Americans. Even if you contract it, you're going to recover. You may have some symptoms, you may have to get some medication, get some treatment, but you're going to recover. If the fear could be lifted from the American people about this disease, this would be wonderful news for the Trump team, wonderful news for America, wonderful news for freedom, and really bad news for the leftists who have seen this as another way to begin to suppress the American people's love of freedom. But on the connecting dots thing, I want to be clear why I'm telling you. I think it's vital to understand that this whole COVID thing is being politically manipulated. I know we've talked about it a bunch of times on this show. We've talked about the idea, for example, that hydroxychloroquine, which we've had on this show Dr. Robin Armstrong from Houston, Dr. Yvette Lozano from here in Dallas. We've had doctors around the country talking about the idea hydroxychloroquine, especially when also prescribed with zinc and I can never say the word right, erythromycin, however you say the word, whatever, with a very clear protocol, using hydroxychloroquine is bringing tremendous results for people who have COVID. Why, ask yourself, why do CDC and other left-wing officials in the country, in Washington, why are they so determined to shut down the practice of prescribing hydroxychloroquine to people who have COVID? It is so extreme now that Robin Armstrong, who's been on the show before, a doctor in Houston, let me know over the weekend that Senator Warren, Elizabeth Hiawatha Warren, and 2 other Democrat senators are calling for an investigation into the nursing facility for which he was the doctor in Houston, and they had an outbreak of COVID-19, and he kept everyone at the facility. He did not send them off to the hospital. We've had him tell the story in the show twice. He has prescribed hydroxychloroquine along with the other 2 elements, a part of the protocol, and he brought the entire patient population in this nursing home, a significant number of people, all the way through their COVID with 1 death, which was someone who was over 100 and had pre-existing conditions and was already in hospice. So this is a doctor who succeeded in bringing healing, bringing health back to people with COVID in a senior home. And that's who Elizabeth Warren and other Democrat senators want to investigate, that facility. And the terminology they were using, their announcement, Warren was using, this is the unauthorized use of hydroxychloroquine. It's not unauthorized. Doctors are allowed to prescribe off-label use of medications. They can prescribe a medication that has been approved, and they're allowed to do that, and they have always been allowed to do that. This is the first time we're hearing people who have no role in the medical world, such as Elizabeth Hiawatha Warren, saying, we're going to investigate, because who is he to use hydroxychloroquine? We don't care if it worked. You kind of think she ought to be talking about investigating the nursing homes in New York State instead, where the governor of that state managed to kill off many senior citizens in the nursing homes by moving COVID-infected patients out of hospitals and into nursing homes and infecting other people living in those nursing homes. That ought to be what she wants to investigate. But no, she wants to investigate the doctor and the facility where the patients with COVID-19 got better, where they recovered, where they moved on with their life because they used hydroxychloroquine. So you have the medical facility community attacking hydroxychloroquine. You have the medical facility also attacking budesonide. We had Dr. Richard Bartlett on this show. The inhaled budesonide, it's a steroid. It's a treatment for asthma. You had Dr. Bartlett explain it in great detail. Every single social media company in the country has taken that interview down. We still have it available now on our website if you want to see it. AmericaCanWeTalk.org. On the homepage, you can still see Dr. Bartlett's interview. Beneath the interview, you can see and click on his paper he wrote, which many of you have been emailing, asked me for. You can find the paper there. But again, why is it when doctors around the country, it's not just this one doctor, around the country are saying budesonide works, it's really great, you should see what's happening, can't get attention, can't get the story told. And one last medication I'll mention briefly, we're going to have to wrap up today, but I will tell you that there's another medication out of Houston, and this is called Oleandrin, and I'll just give you a quick hint about it. We're going to try to get one of the people working on Oleandrin as a cure for COVID on the show, but Oleandrin has shown great promise. It's actually been tested on COVID patients and has succeeded so the patients recover. It's a therapy that works on COVID-19 patients. It had already been through phase 1 and phase 2 of FDA testing. Oleandrin passed in flying colors the testing by the FDA, phase 1 and phase 2, the do no harm phases, so ready to be tried, and now that's being shut down. And again, you have to ask yourself why. I know one answer is the vaccine world, that you have Fauci and others intellectually, professionally and financially invested in vaccines as a cure. You have the whole cabal of international globalists wanting the vaccine to be the cure. But in America, in this precious country rooted in freedom, we the people ought to be standing up to say, you cannot tell us, we cannot use treatments that are therapies that our physicians are saying worked, that trials are showing worked, that patients who have used them have recovered. We don't live in a country where you can tell us we can't have access, or you can orchestrate and manipulate us so we can't get access to things that work. This is the most outrageous, outrageous suppression of the medical system, of the medical community in this country, of the right of doctors to practice medicine and the right of patients to pursue therapies that work. Outrageous suppression ongoing in this country, and everyone ought to be upset about it. At the end of every show, and I think I've gone long today, so I will wrap it up by saying at the end of every show, I tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started the show today talking about Kenosha and useful idiot LeBron, and I would like him to become a less useful idiot. I like him to come out and do the honest, hey, I guess I was wrong about Jacob Blake, but I don't think so. So, criminal complaint that gave rise to the arrest warrant against Jacob Blake is publicly available. It was derived from a sexual assault of his ex-girlfriend, also the mother of his 3 children. Blake had a restraining order against him, extensive criminal record. Read the complaint yourself and understand that police were responding to a call for help from the ex-girlfriend when Blake aggressively resisted arrest. Any woman of any skin color would complain of treatment like that by Blake. Any woman of any skin color would want police protection when harassed by a man like Blake. 57 years ago, MLK's I Have a Dream called for judgment based on content of character. NBA's LeBron James dismisses content of character of Jacob Blake, ignores character of aggrieved woman. James is being played as a useful idiot by Marxists, being goaded into a course that may destroy the NBA. So sad, but James is an adult. He needs to wake up and wise up and then speak up. And Kamala Rand and the Marxist overthrow, the head of the U.S. Communist Party, endorsed Harris Biden. He says, this is our time, revolution, nothing less. Kamala Harris solicited donations for bailing out Minneapolis rioters with criminal records who went on to commit more crime. She publicly supports the riots. They're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop, says she. Rand Paul accosted leaving the RNC at the White House. Tear gas and rubber bullets needed to push the mob away. Portland mob murders a man wearing a Patriot Prayer hat and refers to that human being's loss of life as "we took out the trash." Americans must understand the mobs are not demanding anything. There's nothing to negotiate. The mob's agenda is the Marxist overthrow of America. They must be defeated and destroyed. There is no other choice. And on CDC, 6% in the connecting COVID dots and why it matters to you. Data and analysis is accumulating at all points in one direction. COVID-19 is not as lethal or as contagious or as untreatable as feared. Annals of Internal Medicine, new study, no reason for shutdown, school limitations, median fatality age for COVID, 80. Testing scams abound, testing the healthy unnecessary per the CDC, and it adds fear. CDC 6% factoid belies lethality, regardless of all the nuances I went through, pushed by the left. So hydroxychloroquine, budesonide, oleandrin, all show legitimate therapeutic results, yet all are denounced and suppressed. And yet the lockdowns continue. Americans are right to be restless and ask why. There is no good answer. There are only political explanations. Even Governor Abbott in the great state of Texas needs to call out bad advice, admit mistakes, and open up Texas full tilt. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for listening every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you